Welcome to the OVW Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Ohio Valley Wrestling. My name is Jamin Oaks. I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague, my friend. I don't know why I said it like that. Brian Hines, introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's a Thursday in the feed. You know what that means. We're sitting down with another OVW superstar, this time in the form of Jamin Olivencia. Jamin, how are you?
I'm happy to be alive. How about you guys? Thanks for having me.
We are happy to be alive here. Happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We usually start kind of broad. I have like one general question, but I want to do something different a little bit today with you.
Okay.
Because I think that it will give us the opportunity to inform all the other conversations that we have after this question, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And it's kind of a broad one, but what makes you tick, Jamin Olivencia? Because you are a really interesting cat in the last hour and a half that I've spent with you. What kind of makes you tick?
Just being alive.
Yeah.
Enjoying life. You know, I grew up as a sad kid. You know, I had learning disabilities, and I was in special education classes with a lot of kids with autism and Down syndrome, and so my perception was I was down on myself because I knew I was in these classes and I didn't feel like I was smart enough. But the thing about me is when I was a kid, I always knew that life was important. I felt that. I still, as I'm sitting here right now, I recall walking down my street and making sure the top of my toes hit the cracks of the sidewalk just perfectly. But while I'm thinking that, I'm like, I know I'm supposed to be here. I know I'm supposed to do something in my life. And I think I always just found life as a big dream. I look at it like a beautiful dream, and it has its nightmares and it has its issues, but with all of it there, even with the opposition, I really thrive in it and I love it. There's something about it, the challenge of always getting better. So I think my perception and the things that make me tick was, generated as a kid who was sad on himself and who thought negatively. And over time, I turned that around. And I saw the power in that, and so I like to spread that stuff.
Sure. What was like? Let's go back to the moment you're starting putting it all together. Say, hey, I don't have to live like this. If I'm mindful of these things, it's about my perception of these things. Kind of, what was that era of your life like? What was one thing that stuck out to you in terms of this is where I want to be or this is where I want to head toward?
In terms of wrestling?
No, just in terms of like turning around your mental perception.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to give my mother the full credit.
Okay.
Because my mother always believed in me. As a young child, I was the kid that, when at the age of 4, saying, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And everyone's kind of like, ha, yeah, we'll see, blah, 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 But my mom really believed it. And she chose to really believe in me despite all my, learning difficulties and things like that. So I give her the full credit. And a moment where I think, to answer your question, is when my mother, before school, I would always have a grumpy face. She used to call me crabola. That's crabby in Spanish.
Okay.
And she used to say, why don't you ever smile? And I'm like, because my day is going to suck. Like, I have to go to school. I don't know how to read. And it's just going to suck. And she said, instead of telling yourself you're going to have a bad day, why don't you tell yourself that you're going to do the best you can today? That's at least a better perspective. At least it's a little bit more optimistic. And I would roll my eyes and say, yeah. Well, fast forward, this is probably when I'm like, 6 or 7. Fast forward to when I was like 12 maybe in middle school. And I remember walking to the bus and it was snowing. I grew up in Buffalo, so there's a lot of snow. And I remember having the distinct thought of saying, I'm just going to try what my mom said. And she would repeat this all the time to me. And so I would say it in almost a cynical kind of way to myself, like, okay, I'm going to do the best I can today. Yeah. And so it was still a little shitty from that standpoint, but can I swear? Is that okay?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I was a little cynical, but what I found was when I said that, all of a sudden a new kid sits with me on the bus, and all of a sudden I have a good conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden my day gets a little bit better. And I think so we're going into some deep waters here, and I'm going to tell you why. Because a big part of my life is out-of-body experiences. I've had them growing up very naturally.
Can you describe, just because a lot of people, I think I know, but I probably don't even know. Can you describe what that is before we head into that?
Yeah, of course. I would define it as it's you detaching from your body. if you want to call it from a metaphysical perspective, and seeing yourself in bed. They call it sleep paralysis. I think that's the medical like terminology for it. But yeah, I just had these things growing up, and I would see these like shadow figures like over my bed. So it's like, okay, have you guys ever like woke up and you're stuck and you can't move?
Yeah.
Okay, that's like the process of starting an out of body, meaning you're like stuck between your body and you're leaving. And so that's why you feel stuck, and most people panic, or most people, you know, or they're breathing heavy, or they're whatever.
Yeah. That's what I do whenever I experience that.
That's what I did too, actually. But for me, when I was in that stage, I would see these figures over me, these like shadow-looking figures, and it felt like they were on like my chest, like they were like sitting on me almost. It's very hard to explain, and this sounds gross, but sometimes I felt like they were humping me, like they were just doing things. And I would tell my mom about these. And so I come from a very open-minded family. You know, I wouldn't say we were religious, although we grew up in Catholic religion, but I don't think we believed in it. I think my mom always had an open mind.
So like a cultural Catholicism type
Yeah,
thing?
you know, we're a Hispanic family. We're in Catholicism, but I mean, I don't think we actually believed in it. I think it was more like my mom was always into like spirituality and mindset, and she always believed you could be whatever you want to be, you know, type of girl. It's just who she is. She was a poet. I mean, she was amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds
like it.
I think her perspective is what helped shape it, because I remember telling her about these, and she's like, oh, if you see these things, just stare at it. And I remember she would have this intensity to her when she'd say, just stare at it. And I was like, easy for you to say. And so I'm going back to like when I was like 6, this is happening.
Sure.
You know, I'm giving you a time frame, but
Yeah.
probably around 6. And I'm having them like every night. And it was like weird. Like there was mornings where I'd wake up for school, and my mom would say, all right, time to get up. And my twin brother is like getting up, and my older brother's getting up, and I would leave my body. You know how you wake up and you go back to sleep, but you dream that you're getting up and getting ready? That's out of body, okay?
Okay.
And so you're going through the motions. You think that you're in your body still, and you're going through these motions. And I remember seeing my mom getting ready for work, putting on her makeup, and watching my brothers take a shower, like weird stuff. And my mom would be like, Jamin, or Jordan, go wake up Jamin. And I'm seeing this all happen. And then I see my brother going to the stairs. I'm like, I'm right here.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, Jamin, time to wake up. And all of a sudden I'd zap back into my body. Like, I was like, whoa, okay. So because of those experiences, I got more curious about them. And I would ask my mom about them. Once again, she'd say, just stare at them. Okay, easy for you to say. But when I started getting into like my early teenage years, like 11 or 12, is when I think my perspective started to change. And so to answer your question going back, I think out of bodies helped me understand the importance of mindset. Because what I learned one time is I had this experience where I woke up again and I saw this like Doberman pinscher, and it was staring me in the face, and it had like it's like it seemed like its face was like peeling off or something, and there was drool coming from its mouth, and I remember seeing its teeth, and
It's horrifying.
it was horrifying.
Yeah.
That was my initial thought, and excuse me, and when I saw it, the thing my mom would say to me that was in the Rolodex of my thoughts, my mom would be like, I heard that thought of like, just stare at it. And so for whatever reason that day, I had the courage to do that. And the more I stared at it, the more I started to see like how intricate it was. And then it was like almost like I could see every fiber in its hair on its face. Like it was very detailed.
That's insane.
Almost like a drawing or a cartoon, but then it was real, and it's all these things happening at once, okay? But the minute I started staring at it and really just staying calm in it, I asked myself the question, am I creating this? And the minute I said that, it dissipated in front of me. So I realized, oh, I conquered something. And by the way, I was a very insecure kid growing up. And I couldn't stand going to bed at night because I knew this was going to end up happening. Some nights it didn't happen, but I mean, I knew I can
You're
expect
always going to be
this.
scared of it.
Still, yeah.
Right. And one would say, well, why do you think that was happening? And I think it's because of the attention I was putting on it. Even the fear of it was still an attention on it.
Right.
And I think I was creating that for myself. I was, you know, if you want to call it manifesting or whatever, but I think I was creating that into my existence. And so when I saw this, so this thing dissipates, and I remember waking up and I remember saying, oh, that's how you defeat the things. Okay. And then I got like excited.
Right. This
And-
must
and-
be a new sense of power that you probably had never
100%.
yeah.
And it wasn't too long after that where I started equating it to physical reality, because what I discovered was, through multiple out-of-body explorations, oh, your mind and what you say to yourself and all of this plays a role in what you see. And if it's happening on a non-physical level, whatever you want to call it, then certainly it probably has to happen in the physical realm. Like, the rules are the same. At least that's how I interpret it. And
There's a correlation.
I still do to this day. I still think like the way we think is going to cause a lot of the nightmares or whatever's. Like, who you are is what your life becomes. That's karma to me. Like,
One of
in
the
the
biggest
simplest form.
realizations in my life is that you're in a lot more in control of it than you think you are, in terms of your perception and taking care of yourself and putting out a good energy into the world and whatnot.
Absolutely. And I think if that's what you really believe, then that's what it is. So I think sometimes we say things that we think we believe, but we really don't. It's almost like we're lying to ourselves, or we're trying to lie to someone because we want to look a certain way, but then like you got to ask yourself, like, who am I really? And I don't know that experience, I started to correlate, as you were saying, like, oh, I wonder if I could try this in physical reality. So I go into the bus, going back to the question.
Yeah.
I was saying like, oh, all right, I'm going to have a good day today. But then I would actually have it. And I was like, oh. And I started doing that every day. And some days weren't awesome, but I started to see the trend here. And I started saying, oh, so how I talk to myself, how I communicate with myself, that's really important. And I figured that out at a very young age for me.
That's fortunate, man.
I'm very lucky, dude, but I think it's my mother that it goes back to her. I give her all the praise because she was always optimistic about things. It was always like, it's not a big deal. It's just, like, I just feel like she understood what my pain was, and she understood how to help me complete getting out of it. And yeah, so when you ask what makes me tick, right? Like, I think it's just being alive. I think this is my world, and I am the king of my world, and I don't mean that in a bombastic or authoritarian type of way. I mean it in the way that I live my life in such a way where I really love, and I try to give that love everywhere I go, whether it's through professional wrestling, whether it's through, business coaching, whether it's through being a father, whether it's through being I come from a big family. There's over 250 of us in my family.
Wow.
So like I come from a very big tribe, and, it's just a lot of positive people. And I think all these little elements make me who I am. And so, you could say like, oh, that's cool for you. And it's like, well, I'm really lucky that I was born into a family and a mother who had an open mindset. And, like I was able to navigate my own, learning issues. And it wasn't until I was 16. So my mom, let me go backwards real fast. Yeah. My mom taught me how to meditate at a very young age. And the idea was because I had learning disabilities, she didn't tell me what those issues were. And I'm not going to mention it, what they are, but because I feel like when you say it, you give power to it.
Sure.
And so I had all these things, evidently, and she said, okay, I'm not going to tell him he has these things. I'm just going to teach him to meditate and teach him to have a good mindset. And it took years to get there, but by the time I was 16, let me give you guys perspective. I didn't learn like multiplication until I was 16 years old. Like I was late in the game with everything.
Sure.
But I think her giving me meditations taught me the discipline of the mind and like really seeing your thoughts, not just having thoughts. And so I think I'd like to think I live with purpose, and I'd like to think I live in a way where I mean it. I mean everything I'm doing. I mean it. This is meaningful to me. Just talking to people and talking to you guys, and I look at this as an opportunity just to like do some good stuff in the world. And whatever that means, I'll let it happen. You know, I don't have to define it. I just know my intention is that. So I ride off of the intentions of things.
I just love a couple of things, because there's people that hit their mid-40s or even older who don't get that release on life that you got at 12 to 16. That's a really amazing thing. And your mom, I think it's because moms often have such a good intuition for what their children needs. She might have been gotten told something else by a teacher or something, but she knew what you needed and gave it to you. And I love that. I think that's so special, man. I really do.
Thank you. She was an awesome woman. I lost her a couple of years ago, and it was like the hardest thing. And I used to tell people that my biggest fear is losing my mom, because she was such a mentor, and she was so fucking cool. She was so like down to earth. I remember my friends would be like, dude, I want to come out and hang out with your mom. I'm like, dude, what about me, man? So
they're like, you're all right.
Yeah, that's what it was. And she'd make them rice and beans and ask them 5,000 times, do you want any more? And they're like, no, I'm okay. Are you sure? It's like, Mom, get out of here, But she was just someone who believed in me, and growing up in a big family, you have older cousins, blah blah blah. So sometimes I'd get picked on, or when I was in school, definitely got picked on, like about wanting to be a wrestler. I was very vocal about that at a young age, and my mom knew that's what lit me up, and I think she just helped me attack that in a very practical kind of way. And I'll never forget this, and I'm gonna swear, but I remember one time. She looked me in the eyes. Maybe I was 10, and I was having a bad day, and she started crying because I think she saw me so sad.
Yeah.
And she just looked me in the eye, and she says, Jamin, no matter what in life, you could be whoever the fuck you want to be, so just do it, and don't let anybody ever stop you. And I remember there was this like intensity to her.
Yeah.
But I felt that, and I believed her, and it was those little things that I think always resonated with me throughout life, and it's part of who I am, and it's part of what makes me tick. And my daughter as well, she makes me tick, man. It's like a smarter version of you, and you just want to make sure you're watering that very well. And I've never had her like I could say, oh, Jasmine, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Yeah, sure. She's never talked back, and I feel so grateful. She's 16 now, but
16 and
That's
not
quite a
talked back.
feat, yeah.
That's you
I'm
did a
very
good job.
lucky,
You
very
did a good
lucky,
job.
and I'll give her mother a lot of credit too. You know what I mean? Like, but even though her and I are not together, we always worked as a team and focusing on just her health. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And who she is, and
You can't make it about one or the two
Can't.
of y'all. It's got to
No.
be about the kid.
you can't. And I had her very young. I was 21 years old, so that was I had to grow up pretty quickly. So yeah, man. So these are the things that make me tick. My family, like my passion for arts, my passion for helping people, my passion for life, my lust for life, I should say. I love it, man. It's cool, and this is cool too. This is like we're having this experience right now. Okay, this is happening right now in our lives. Like, if we could just stop and like think about that for a second, it's fascinating to be alive. Life is short. And we're all different ages here, but like one thing I think we can agree on as adults is this is a flicker of light, my friends.
Yeah.
It goes very quickly. So I think it's important to enjoy it. And I think when I look back at my 20s, you always say, like, I wish I wasn't worrying about this or that or whatever things you had told yourself. And I think no matter where you are on the spectrum of life, whether you're positive or negative, or you're going to go through these experiences, because without the opposition, who are you?
Mm-hmm. Well, you really have one of the things that helped put some of the topics that we're talking about throughout this conversation in perspective was, it's not natural to feel bad all the time, but it's also not natural to feel good all the time. You
Right.
have to have the opposite to understand why one makes you feel the way that it does.
Absolutely.
You have to be, and it'd be great if we could all only have the positive. That's just not how life works sometimes, right?
No, it doesn't. And how do we ascend mostly in life, right? Like, it's through the opposition. It's never through your wins. Mm-hmm. Your wins are like short-lived. It's the pain that you go through that lingers but also changes you. And I think instead of looking at it like it's such a bad thing, it's more like a companion in the war of thoughts, right? Like, I think it's designed for us to grow. And I think if we take a mindset where it's like, okay, this is happening and this sucks, but I'm going to do the best I can with it.
Yeah.
And that versus saying I'm fucked or I can't get out of this or how am I going to do this? And you might go through all that and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's totally natural.
Yeah, it's totally natural. You should have those moments, but at some point, I have a rule. And an Egyptian man told me this years ago. I was 24 when I met him, and he became a mentor for me for a few years. He was a next door neighbor at an apartment complex I was living with. His name is Bashir.
Where are you living?
I was living here in Louisville. This is
Okay.
when I was at OVW during the WWE days.
Okay, right on. So
And-
24. Yeah.
Yeah. So I came here to OVW when I was 18.
Okay.
So real young. And this man, he said, man, you're going to have bad days, this or that, and blah, blah, blah. But remember, man, like, don't let it go past one moon, 24 hours. And that always stuck with me. So when I had an issue, it was important to me that I didn't let it linger into the next day. And you have your days where it does that. But for the most part, I like to stay disciplined in that. Like, okay, let it go. And that's what it was today. And tomorrow's a new sheet of paper that we get to draw on.
Yeah. I have a really hard time getting to that. I'm gonna start using that actually, because I think if I can get to the moon and wake up without it, I think I'll be fine. I think I hit right at dusk, and I'm like, no, it's time to have this conversation right now. But I think I'm gonna start doing what you're describing is just like sitting with it a little bit longer. Don't let it go past another moon. That sounds really simple.
Yeah, it is simple, and I think a lot of this stuff is simple. I think maybe the way it works out for some people is just they never was taught that, and so that's the conundrum for them. In my case, it's opposite, and I feel grateful for that. I feel like that's a power that's been given to me, and so to spread it in any way, I think is handy. It's like, oh, you need this wrench to do that thing.
Yeah.
But that's all you needed was a wrench. You
just a tool.
didn't need like a sword or a gun or a fucking knife. You didn't need all these like things. Like
you needed something to fix it, not something to destroy
we
it.
create things, and we go down these rabbit holes and we make it hard on ourselves. But I think if you do that, once again, let's go back to the rules of what I believe in out of body exploration. Like physical reality is designed by the way you think. And what I mean by that, it's not like, oh, I'm creating this. I think we're sharing a bunch of like realities with each other, but I think the way we interpret them is the key. I think the way you look at your life is what you're actually preying on. When people are like, even if you're religious or whatever, I like to pray. Okay, I wouldn't call myself religious, but
Sure.
I've seen angels and these really interesting things through out of body exploration. So I know it's like, for me, okay, I feel like there's different civilizations out there, just like there's different civilizations in humanity. And I think Earth is just nothing but a playground where we get to experience a dense reality for a minute. But that's just me,
And it's really only for a minute.
Yeah, it's really for a minute.
Yeah.
And it goes quick. And so how you communicate with yourself in that time frame matters. Like what you say to yourself matters. And if you can look at any shortcomings you have in your life, no matter who you are, I think it's very easy to, if you reflect. Most people don't want to reflect because they feel maybe bad about themselves on something. But I think if you look back at your stuff and reflect on your life, why you're where you are. Yeah. I mean, it's decisions, it's thoughts, it's whatever. But I think all those are all, puzzle pieces that make the tapestry that our life is. And so I think it's simple. Yeah, I go back to simplicity. And I think imagination is very powerful. I think people, it's like, once again, if we're at night and we're praying to God, let's say, and we say, God, give me more of this, give me more of that, I think we're almost coming from a place of lack thereof. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to call it the universe, God, I think it's responding to that. I think it's responding to your lack thereof. So you get more lack, But I think if you're coming from a place of power, like, hey, this is a challenge in my life, and I would like more strength in this area, and I look forward to it, and you have almost an enthusiasm to it, like it's a challenge. Let me see if I can play with my brain here and do something different. I think if you could do that, you're probably in a better position than most people.
Yes.
I think it's simplicity.
It's I'm not exactly religious or spiritual either, but I do kind of gravitate toward Buddhism in a way, and it's because Buddhism is very much just about removal of the external factor that is making your life the way that the way that you're reacting to it, the way it's making you feel, etc. And removing all of that and trying to reach a place of simplicity,
Yes.
and just like wholeness of thought.
Yes.
And like I said, I'm not religious or spiritual even, but there's something very comforting to me about wholeness, like the idea of wholeness of thought. So we're gonna. I'm really glad that we jumped into that
Yeah,
at the
so
beginning.
that's
No,
that.
because I could tell. Like I said, we spent 5 minutes. I walked out with to help you get something out of your car, make sure you get back in more accurately. And a guy just asked about weightlifting tips, and you were more than happy to break it all down like immediately. Like I could just tell you were kind of a different kind of guy, and I wanted to get that out there in your own words for our listeners, because I think that any conversation past that needed to have that as the forefront, right? That is the preamble to any other conversation. So let's go back.
Sure.
4 years old. What got you into wrestling?
Yeah, I remember Macho Man Randy Savage jumping off the top ropes onto someone, maybe Ricky Steamboat. I actually don't remember who it was, but I had a vision of myself doing it. Like something, I don't know what you want to call it, but I had a vision, and I knew immediately from there on out that's what I was going to do. I was never that kid at a young age where I was like, I want to be a cop, I want to be a fireman. You know, like I knew, like I'm going to be a wrestler. Like I knew just where it was going to go. And growing up, we had a cheater box. Do you know what cheater boxes are? Do you guys remember those?
I don't know what that is.
Satellite?
Oh wait, it's hacked cable, pirated cable?
It was hacked cable.
Yeah.
And we had one of those, and so we used to get all the WWF pay-per-views back in the day. We had all pay-per-views for free, and we would watch the In Your Houses, and so wrestling was just in my house constantly.
And you have a big family, you mentioned.
Huge family.
Is it just you, or is it everybody?
Yeah, so sometimes we had our cousins, sometimes like because we had the pay-per-view box.
Oh, yeah.
So like the cousins would come over, and we're in the shotgun house, you know.
Yeah.
The house we grew up in is the same house my mother grew up in. You know, my mom's 1 out of 12. You know, it's like it's crazy. So but we had this shotgun house, and there's like 20 of us in there, 30 of us in there watching a pay-per-view. It was cool. Like, but I always knew, man, I grew up watching Shawn Michaels, and that's who I wanted to be like. I was like, okay, that's the guy I want to be like. He had the girls, he had the charisma, he looked cool to me.
Yeah.
And you know, everyone else in my family was a Bret Hart fan, so everyone was against me constantly.
So yeah, you were the odd man out.
Yeah, odd man out, totally.
Yeah.
But I was okay with that. Like, I was always like, yeah, so I knew from a very young age, man, like, that's what I was going to do. So, yeah, 4 years old, watching Macho Man Randy Savage. And by the way, we'll say when I was 5 or 6, I remember jumping off the fire hydrant, doing the elbow drop, thinking of that moment as a kid, like, and I scraped my elbow or whatever. But, yeah, I always wanted to be that. Remember Nintendo? Like, you're a little younger.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we had one, but
WrestleMania for Nintendo. Do you remember that?
is
Yes,
that the
I
one
do.
that's like is that the one that's Mortal Kombat, or is that Royal Rumble that's like Mortal Kombat? Well, I know one of those two is like is not really a wrestling
I haven't
game.
played
It's
it
more
in
of a
forever.
fighting
I don't
game.
know.
but-
I don't know.
It's one of those two.
I'm actually upset with myself that I couldn't answer that question because I was a big gamer growing up. But yeah, I don't know. There was the arcade game, and I remember that was a little more Mortal Kombat-esque.
Okay,
you know,
yeah.
they looked a little more real. But yeah, the Nintendo version. Anyway, I just going back to Macho Man, man. There was something about him. I was never a Hulk Hogan fan. You know, I was like, nah, I don't like this guy. I like this guy. But Macho Man was moody.
Looks like you got a good sniffer on you, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Macho Man, you know, there's that idea of Macho Man, and it's an accurate one of the, you know, King Macho Man, the really big, regal, you know, huge personality guy. But no, there's that
He was always on.
he's that underlying moodiness, that underlying paranoia to him.
Yeah.
Did you tap into that?
I did, because I was so sad as a kid. So wrestling was like the only thing that made me happy, but I was able to relate to the heels a little bit more because I felt moody.
Because they had a little more skin in the game.
Yeah, like even like Ninja Turtles. Like I was into Raphael.
Yeah.
and my favorite color is red. And
I was a Michelangelo guy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
that's my
tells you
twin
where I was
brother.
at.
He was a Michelangelo guy. Everyone likes Michelangelo, but yeah, man, I don't know. I think for me, those were the things that fueled me, and some people say, like, how did you get into wrestling? And I think, I think back to it, and I'm like, okay, when I was a kid in school, I would, if I failed a test, which I failed many of them all the time, I would always imagine,
you both, brother.
okay, this is me. This is the part of the match where I'm losing. Like, I was thinking everything always in wrestling terms. So, like, when people are talking about, like, manifestation and things, I'm like, no. Like, really real manifestation in terms of, like, are you really believing in it? Are you seeing it in your heart? Are you seeing it in your experiences? I remember when I was in high school, I asked this girl out. She was, like, next to my locker, and she smiled at me once, and I'm like, oh, a girl likes me, and let me ask her out. And I did that and failed miserably.
Yeah,
but
as you would.
But once again, when that would happen, I would say, oh, this is the part of the match where I'm losing. And I think I was just always, everything was in terms of wrestling to me.
Did wrestling just maybe, like, help you make a lot of sense of the world?
Of the world, yeah. I think you understand there's good and bad, and there's times when you're a good guy and you don't win, and there's times when the bad guys win and vice versa. And I think that's how I was able to understand the world at such a young age, or at least my life. And I always put it in those terms for, my whole childhood. I mean, quite frankly, all the way until I graduated high school. That was my life.
So you graduate high school. You're still in Buffalo when you graduate high school?
Yeah, so I graduate high school, and I guess I have to go to college. Like I remember my guidance counselor was like, "Oh, so what do you want to what college do you want to go to, and what do you want to study?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I think I want to be a pro wrestler." And she goes, "Jamin, pro wrestling's like trying to make it in the NFL. Let's be a little more realistic." And I remember saying to her, like, "No, I am being realistic though," and I was genuine when I was saying that. I wasn't even mad that she was questioning it. I was genuine. I was like, "No, this is really what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
And she's like, well, honey, you got to be a little more realistic, and we got to pick a career field. And so I picked like phys ed or something, and I wanted to be like a gym teacher. And then I went to school, and then I switched to psychology because I was always amazed with the mind. Yeah. So I thought that would be helpful. So then I went to like school for like, I don't know, 2 semesters, and then quit in the middle of it, got into pro wrestling. So I'm 17, 18 here, okay?
Sure.
And I got into pro wrestling, and here we go. A place called Empire State Wrestling. It was a local wrestling organization in Buffalo, New York, and it's actually very popular today, so shout out to them. And ESW, they're called. And yeah, it just all came natural to me from there. Like, even when I got in the ring for the first time, I remember doing my first show, and I got this massive reaction, and I wasn't, but I think what it really was my spirit was so excited to do this. And I think from a metaphysical standpoint, the audience or whoever you're talking to on a daily basis feels what you are, even if you're portraying something else, Yeah. And for me, I once again, I gathered that really quickly when I got into wrestling. I learned that. I said, oh, okay, my excitement's getting them excited. Keep doing this. And yeah, and then shortly after, OVW. I mean, I knew I wanted to go to the WWE. Or let me backtrack if you don't mind.
No. This is all great, man. You've been a wonderful interview so far, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. So when I was this is a story, I don't think I've ever told this before, so I'll say it on this podcast. When I was 17, I was doing a indie show for ESW. It was probably like my 3rd show, and they do those autograph sessions like before the show, or I think it was after the show for me in this case, because this guy comes up to me and he says, "What are your goals?" And I'm like trying to sign an autograph from here, man. He goes, "What are your goals?" Yeah. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to WWE." And he said, "Oh, okay." And he writes his number on a card, and he says, "Give me a call sometime." And so I say, "Okay, yeah, sure." And he wrote his email, actually, not his number. He wrote his email. I'm sorry. And so I go to my mom, and I say, "Hey, this guy gave me, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to talk to him." And she's like, "I don't want you." So I email him, and he says, "Yeah, why don't we meet to eat and talk?"
Yeah.
And my mom's like, no way, you're not meeting some stranger.
And you're still not even. You're still underage. At
Yeah. My mom had to actually sign a waiver for me when I was young to wrestle. Yeah, so I started at 17. Okay. And so I say, Mom, I just believe, this is how cool my fucking mom is, though. I go, Mom, I just believe this is something I need to pay attention to. And she said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I'll drive you there, and I'll stay in the parking lot of the restaurant, and I want you guys to sit in a window where I can see you.
Man, your mom's an ace, it sounds like.
She's fucking awesome. She was fucking awesome.
Yeah, total pro move.
Dude, she's like, man, it's like, I don't even, sometimes you're like, are you my mom or are you my, like, my good friend? You know, she's just she just knew how to be all the things with us, you know, and...
Shout out to her.
Shout out to my fucking mom, dude. Excuse my language, but
we'll have another toast to her afterwards.
Thank you. So, well, I'm losing track, I suppose.
Your mom's parked outside.
So I'm at this thing. So I tell you, I believe in like angels and stuff because I've seen them. Okay, and just through out of body exploration. I mean, so I believe people are disguised as different civilizations in life, and I think this person was an angel, and to this day I still think he is. And his name is Ray. And Ray has this talk with me, and he's a little bit quirky in his own way. So I didn't know what his full intentions were. I'm thinking, does this guy want to like have sex with me, or
anything's
what's
on the
the
table.
intent?
Yeah.
What's the intent?
Right.
But I went and talked to him.
You're a young man. You're a good-looking cat.
Yeah.
You know, power
It's
dynamics.
a little strange, right? Yeah. And I knew that, but there was something about him that seemed genuine, so I wanted to test it. And when I talked to him, the whole time he's like talking business, like, okay, what do you want? What do you see for yourself? And I was like, well, yeah, I see myself in WWE. He's like, how do you get to WWE? And I was like, well, I already did my research on this. I got to go to this place called Ohio Valley Wrestling. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm gonna fund this all for you because I saw something in you he goes, I go to these indie shows. He goes, I was a wrestling fan growing up. I go to these indie shows, but I see something in you and I want to help you. So he decides to sponsor me, and I'm still wondering. I asked him outright, "Do you have other intentions?" He's like, "No, like, I think you can make it, and I think that's something you should. Yeah, I think you should do that, but you'll need help." And he learned about our situation, our financial situation. We didn't have good financial situations, so he, in a nutshell, he didn't give this to me all at once, but he basically invested $170,000 into me, and I was able to go to OVW. When I was 18, and I was able to live my dream. I didn't have to have a normal job, so I just trained wrestling all the time. That's all I did. Right. I trained wrestling twice a day. I would go to all the house shows. And even though I wasn't a contracted talent at the time, I was doing all the things. And that's how I met Al, and then Al started giving me opportunities. And if it wasn't for his funding, which only lasted actually a few years. And then one day he said, well, you know, I'm not going to continue to do this, but I believe in you. And I said, no problem. And then I ended up doing it for myself through OVW and through merchandising. And, yeah,
that's amazing.
And so I feel fortunate for that. I feel like that just doesn't happen to everybody. And I think that all is a testament to, once again, I think a positive attitude. Mm-hmm. And I believed in myself, and so therefore life gave me the resources to make that happen. And I think that's how this shit works a little bit. So I feel grateful for that. Yeah.
What was because now you've got me wondering.
Yeah.
Was your mom at more of an ease after
Not really.
that? Or,
not right away, because I think it's still like, well, but then over time she got to know him, and to this day I talk to him once a day.
That's awesome.
And
wow.
You know, he's in his late 70s now. I remember, you know, I had an out-of-body experience, right? I always had these, right? Continuing on. So, like, my out-of-body's quality of my out-of-body experiences started to change because as I was gaining confidence, I was having better things to see.
Sure.
And I remember I saw this, once again, I call it an angel, okay? You know, like, if you get with religious people, they might say, oh, it's the devil. It's like, no, it was really nice. But it's actually really nice. But I asked this thing one time. I had a conscious thought. So when you're out of body, let me explain this real fast. When you're out of body, you're not thinking with your like Jamin brain. You're thinking with like from another perspective. I can't explain it. It's just so like when you see yourself sleeping in bed, it's you. But there's this sensation of like also understanding, oh, that's a role I play in this life. This is who I am. Whatever I can't see right now, whatever's seeing myself in bed, like that's forever.
The metaphysical.
Yeah, and so I made that correlation very young too, and I think when I saw this thing, I asked it, hey, who's Ray to me? And it's like, oh, a ray of light, ray of sunshine, and I'm like, oh, I see, so I don't know. Everything to me is symbolic in that sense, and I think it's all created through what you believe, and so I don't know. I never expected good things to come to me, but I always expected to get the best out of myself and communicate with life, even if it's with a tree. And that sounds silly to a lot of people, but if you go up to a tree, I invite everyone to do this. Just one freaking day, go up to a tree by yourself, put your hand on it, and do it. Be genuine about it. Actually wish it well. Treat it like it's a dog or anything else. Like give it good vibes. And I think if you do that, it's going to do the same thing for you. It's like saying hello to something. And I think what I learned out of body exploration is when you're traveling and you're outside, you see the trees, they look like antennas. And what I gathered at a young age, once again, is, oh, these things are very powerful. They are communicating across everything to each other. That's my interpretation. I'm not saying that's the truth. But I think because I did interpret it that way, I said, well, then surely if I say hello to it, it could give me good energy in return. So I was always genuine with nature, and I think nature is actually the true politics that you have to be cool with in the world. Like, I think nature is controlling everything in many ways, and call it God or whatever, right? Like, I stay open to it all.
Nature always wins, no matter what you call it. That's
like it's nature. So, I mean, I don't know that. So I'm going off into a little bit of a tangent there, but for me, it's these things are really important, and they all play a role into the successes of life, or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know if it's called successes. Like, I just think like you live in who you are. Yeah. So. No,
you've been. It's always. I think you'll agree with me, Brian Hines. We never know what we're gonna get in these things. We never know what we're gonna get in these things.
I have no earthly idea what I'm gonna get whenever I sit down in the chair, and this is one of those days where I would really just like to sit back and just listen, because we talked for an hour and a half before we sat down to talk on camera, and your perspective on things is just fascinating. Yeah. All the way around.
Thanks, man.
You could tell you are a guy. There was not a stranger in here the entire time that you've been in here. You are very outgoing, very positive, put out a lot of positive. It seems like you had something quick to say to everybody the moment you met them. Like, you just seem like that kind of guy, and it is really refreshing to be around that. It really, really is, because there's not a lot of I can't remember if we touched on it on microphone or right off microphone, but there's not a lot of good in the world sometimes. Like, you got to create your own.
You have to. And I think people right now, I think we all need to use each other to get there, Like, none of us get to the top, guys, if you want to call it the top. Like, none of us get anywhere without each other. Mm-hmm. And I think the way we communicate with others, and most importantly, the way we communicate with ourselves, is what's going to determine the quality of what life is. And like an example, and I don't like talking about myself like this because I feel like it's pompous, but I'm going to give you an example of my mindset. So I'm on my way to the studio here, and my thought process is, I just want to give something good to everyone, and that's all I expect out of myself. And I think when you frame your mind in that sense, therefore it may come out that way. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'm not holding on to whether that does or not. It's just that's my intent, and that's what I stick to, and I'm going to give it 100% and be the best I can and be a good person in the process and treat people good, because everyone's fucking suffering out there. And I don't think it costs that much to smile at someone or open the door for them or be cool, even if they don't give it back to you. You open the door and they don't say thank you. Some people are like opening the door and they're like, well, they didn't say thank you. And my thing is, well, why did you fucking open it for them? Was it to get a
Was
thank
it
you?
to get the thank you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like looking at those details and saying, well, that's why your life is in shambles, because you might be doing something from a point of view that might be selfish sometimes and or self-serving.
Yeah,
or
what
you're-
you expect in
Right,
return.
and so and that's not a bad thing, but it's also an answer to why sometimes people ask the question, why is my life so rough, or why is this so hard? I just, it's like, well, you're creating it. That's your perspective, like.
Yeah.
But you can also turn it off too. It's an out of body experience. You know, when you're out of body, everything's thought responsive immediately. It's like when someone has a dream. They say, oh, I had this dream where I was in high school and then I was with my ex-girlfriend and then I was at a party, or, you know, all of us have had that kind of thing. And what's happening is your mind is just going. Now, the difference between an out of body, and that's out of body, and then physical reality is it's physical reality is this. Wait some time. So the consistency of your thoughts takes more time to develop, just like a muscle growing, right?
Sure.
So out of body is just quick. So I understand, okay, this is a law. And here in physical reality, it takes more time to develop, but you have to stay consistent. And so consistency is what creates either complacency or greatness, I suppose.
That's a hell of a quote, man. That's a
Yeah.
hell of a quote. Consistency is what creates either complacency or greatness.
I suppose so.
Brian Hines, I know that you had a couple questions for our guest here.
Wow, we've talked about so many different things, and we've touched on a lot of stuff. I don't really even know where to begin. Off mic, we talked about how you were at OVW a while ago, and then you spent some time away.
Yeah.
And now you're back in OVW. What did you learn in that time where you stepped away and went and did other things? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about wrestling? What did you learn about life?
That's really an awesome question, and I appreciate it, because that was probably one of the most, that was the hardest times in my life. You know, I won't get into the details, but, you know, I was being looked at by the WWE for a very long time, since I was probably 19. And then when I was either 29 or 30, I don't remember, I had a circumstance where I talked to someone backstage and I shouldn't have done it at the time, and I was kicked out, and then I was told I was never going to be allowed back again. And my career was over within seconds. And I almost thought it was like not even real. I was like, is this a joke? Because it just happened so quickly. And I had so many people there at the time who supported me, and then yeah, so that kind of damaged me quite a bit. And then what hurt the most about that experience is there was a lie about the story of what I did, which wasn't true. And that hurt too. And so it was just kick him when he's down, you know, and I didn't know, like, wrestling was already planned in my soul, and the WWE was. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just wrestling. It was the WWE I was also in love with, you know. It wasn't the fame. It wasn't money, or it was the WWE. It was such a big part of my childhood.
For sure.
And I knew I could be part of that company in some way, shape, or form. And it and anyone at the time who was, you know, maybe supporting me knew I was the guy that was probably next in line to be there. And so you feel like you let down a bunch of things, a bunch of people. And then the story that was put out was not true at all. And that really hurt. I don't want to get into it because it's not important anymore.
No, it is for what it's worth out there, but I will not give any indication on how to find it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So that was really, really hard for me.
I could imagine.
And I had to ask myself, who are you without this wrestling persona that you've been your whole life, you know? And I remember calling someone from WWE, I won't say who, but a very famous name, and he was friends with me. He was a mentor of mine. And he said, hey, man, look, I think you should get into some type of like life coaching or something, because there were so many times we saw you like have groups of people around you, and we're like, what's he doing? What is he talking about? And you get closer to the conversation, and you're just talking to him about life. And I remember thinking that's who he really is. And so I said, okay, I don't see myself doing that. But then I started off like talking at schools about mindset, and I had fun doing that. But then I was like, I don't like talking at I don't like doing assemblies, because I felt like I wasn't actually helping. So yeah, like I get this admiration, and it's like me talking on a stage, but I actually didn't feel like I was making a change. So then it turned into...
For some people, all they need is that instant feedback, but you didn't engage with that instant feedback. You wanted something a little bit more.
I needed something more, I think, because I was hurting so badly.
Sure.
And I think the only way... It's like, when you're having a bad day and say you're nice to somebody, and they're like, oh, thank you, you kind of feel a little bit better. Well, I didn't feel that way when I was doing, like, talks at these schools at an assembly for an hour in front of 400 kids or whatever. Like, I didn't actually feel good about it. I felt like it was just a reason for them to get out of class, and I wasn't really helping. And you could talk about things, and maybe people pick up some things, but I just didn't. The attention didn't feel there for me. So then I started thinking, well, what if I talk to these superintendents of schools and see if I can spend the day at a school for like a whole day and like talk to classes, like more intimate conversations.
Yeah.
And so I started having conversations about people's challenges and what they're going through. And what I found was this is way more effective. And you're there for 6 hours or 7 hours or whatever. But this is way more effective to talking to people and actually, inspiring change out of them. Because what was happening was it wasn't me talking the whole time. It was me asking questions. And then these kids were engaged, where even kids who didn't get along would end up getting along because maybe they had a difference in perspectives, and I would help them mediate that. And I started to see a power there. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, maybe I could grow a business. Maybe I can try doing this more often. And then it turned into, it's a lot of stuff. But I mean, then I got into the spiritual communities, and I went on a radio show, and all of a sudden I had a bunch of emails after that asking for my services, and I didn't even know what my services
You're like, I don't know. You're like, which one?
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell me.
Yeah, actually, that's hilarious. But I didn't know. So then you just kind of fall into these things. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I got to build a website. Okay, I got to figure out prices for something like this. And you start real low in the beginning because you're nervous and you're not sure if your value's good.
Yeah.
And then a few years goes by and you're getting more people, and then you're getting people from different arenas, not just your average folk. Then I started getting like executives of major companies, and it was all through word of mouth. Like I don't even think I've ever advertised what I did for the past 10 years.
When you're good, you don't have to.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think I like doing that anyway. I think that's, once again, there's certain things it's just not my flavor to do so. If you know what I can do, great. And so I ended up building this business, and I ended up being into like doing corporations and speaking at them, and then business coaching, and then it's life has been a whirlwind. And so it got to a point where my business is successful, and I went back to OVW one day just to visit with my daughter because I wanted to make a video. I like doing, I like making, so if you ever watch my content, I'm making content that's around self-development and bettering yourself. But I think I do it in maybe a way that's unorthodox, where I am the 11th warrior. I am Jamin. And so I'm doing it from this wrestling persona.
Yeah, it's your two worlds that you're kind of...
Yeah, I was bringing two worlds together, and I thought it would be cool to, like, express myself that way, because I'm not the type of guy that gets in front of a camera and says, okay, guys, here's 5 ways to raise your vibration, and we're going to do that over the thing. And it just wasn't in my cup of tea, man. I that's not how I like to express myself. I think I like to express myself in very creative ways and epic ways, and that's what makes me feel powerful. And so when I started, so then I wanted to make a piece for OVW. because I was like, OVW's always meant a lot to me and blah, blah, blah. And so I made a piece.
Did you just happen to be back in Louisville? Are you central to Louisville in this time when you come back to visit, or how does
yeah,
that happen?
I live in Louisville.
Okay.
I live in Louisville.
Okay.
I've always, because my daughter was born there. And then I do business overseas.
Okay, right on.
So it just depends on what my schedule is. But sometimes I'm gone for several months at a time. So everything's going great in my life. And I take me and my daughter. I asked her one day, she's 16, right? So like she's doing the thing a little bit where she doesn't want to always spend time with dad. She wants to hang out with her friends. And I said, oh, hey, do you want to come to wrestling with me one day? And I think she had just seen Wrestlers on Netflix, and she was like, oh, that would be interesting because I already saw that, and she was explaining it to me, and I was like, oh, this would be something cool we could do together.
Yeah.
So
she knew you were a wrestler.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, she always knew I was a wrestler, but she was young when I was like, even when I was champion at OVW, like she was, I don't know, 6 or 7. And
maybe didn't really have the best.
I ask her all the time, like, do you remember that? And she's like, I just don't. And here's what triggered me to get back. So this is actually funny that we're talking about this. So we go to OVW. I make a video for them where I'm speaking over it, and I'm just using their clips, and I made a video. And so I like video editing. You know, I learned like how to do this over the years, building my business. So I found a passion in making art stuff. And so I make this video for OVW, and then you know, I think at the time one of the investors there was like, hey, can you do more of these? And, you know, whatever. And they compensated me for it. And so I did it. And so then my daughter Jasmine started coming with me every week just to film. And she was like, this is cool, you know. And she's, you know, it was like a dad and daughter thing that we could look forward to.
That's awesome.
And one day in the car, we're driving and we're leaving the show. And she's like, yeah, I just wish I would have saw you wrestle once.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
So I'm like, damn, you know, I'm out of shape. I don't even know if I could do this thing anymore. Like, you know, I needed a knee replacement when I was 36. And instead of getting a knee replacement, I tried stem cells, and stem cells grew back 80% of my cartilage, like changed my life.
Whoa.
And then I thought it was like, well, don't get back into something that costs a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like that you're going to end up losing again over time. But I said to myself, you know, why don't I just do one more run and make it as epic as possible and have a good time? And so I feel like I'm in a place in my life where I'm just having a good time right now. I'm in the bonus rounds. Yeah. Like there's no dream to get. There's no It's just let's just go and give people a really good time through your performances. And so here we are today. So yeah, those years were really tough, but I also learned. So you asked, I'm sorry, what I learned. And I think what I learned is there's more to me than just wrestling. And I think that goes for every human being. There's more to you than just whatever thing you're attaching to. There's so many opportunities out there to learn and grow constantly. And
correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of feels like there's an element of this where you were glad to have the time off of wrestling to build this whole other business for yourself, this whole other lifestyle for yourself, and also to feel a little more 360 degree of a person yourself. Am I off base with that?
No, I think you're right. I think there's just so many emotions that over that decade that it's all crazy to me, man. I don't know. I don't even know. Like, it just worked out. It was like the perfect storm, the way everything has come together. And it was my daughter that motivated me. Yeah. And so I trained jiu-jitsu. I've been training jiu-jitsu for a couple of years, okay? And so I was like, well, you can do jiu-jitsu. You could probably do wrestling, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I that's when I started, like, tiddling with it, and I just see it as a great opportunity to express my talents. And I think because I'm older now that I'm even more talented than, like, there's probably certain things I can't do anymore, when I was in my 20s, but I think I know who I am now when I come out versus maybe then you're still kind of guessing, even though you're athletic and people love you. Sure. I actually think I feel more in my power now than ever, and I think it's a great opportunity to express that and share that with everybody.
In the handful of times that I've gotten to see you wrestle at OVW on this current run, went back and rewatched some old stuff after I realized you had a company or a history with the company. The handful of times I've gotten to see you, even if it's just like you out there kicking people out of the ring and stuff, I'm like, oh, that guy's got it. I'm like, that guy's really, really, really good. And then, of course, I'm like, oh, you're the idiot for not knowing him. But, like, no, yeah, like, if there was anything that you were scared of in terms of, like, in-ring stuff, I don't. The few things I've seen of you so far in this current OVW run, you don't have anything to be scared of, man. It doesn't look like you've missed anything. So.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. No, I'm having fun. This is, like I said, the bonus rounds, and I'm going to make it as epic as possible and have a good time doing it, and most importantly, affect the fans in a way that is good for everyone. You know, you could look at me as a heel or a face, or I'm just Jamin. And that's what you get. It's not me being a bad guy or a good guy. It's like, this is what Jamin is, and that's what I want to express to everybody.
I've got two things on the way out here.
Mm-hmm.
Has your daughter got to see you wrestle yet?
Oh, yeah.
How was that like?
It was cool. I think underwhelming for me, because she was like, oh, yeah, it was awesome. But I was like,
You're like, yeah,
I wanted, like, you know,
Yeah.
like, come on, give me my
That's it?
flowers.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was cool. It's cool. It's meaningful to me that she wants to come and support, and she's so supportive. And I think her points of views, even when she's giving me feedback, are really awesome and mature. And it tells me that it's probably in her blood a little bit. She doesn't want to get in the wrestling business, but I think she understands what it is. And she would say things like what you said, that was very kind of you, by the way, but, you know, like, oh, I could tell you kick differently than most people, or oh, you're more intense here. And it's like, oh, cool, you know. And I just think it's special that I get to show her that. And it makes me feel good, you know, like, as a dad. Not even like for the ego, right? Just as a dad, like,
No, that's
my
really
daughter.
special, man.
My daughter thinks it's cool that I do this, and yeah.
That's really special, man. And this one is a little bit easier, a little bit more of a softball.
Okay.
If anybody needs to get in touch with you on any social media or for any of your business contacts, what is the best way to do that for you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, jaminolivencia.com.
We'll plug that here
Thank you.
in the title, info, bio stuff.
The show notes.
Show notes, that's what they're called.
Yeah, what you said.
Thank you. And I'm on Instagram at the 11th Warrior. Yeah.
It's,
or
the numerals, right?
yeah, or 11th. Yeah,
11th.
yeah. And or you just search Jamin Olivencia. I mean, it's probably not hard to find me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. That's it. I don't really like. I don't sit on socials for too much, like the
Ain't nothing on
TikToks, and it's just not my flavor.
Ain't nothing on them.
So that's where you can find me. But if you need to contact me directly, go to my website or go on Facebook Messenger, whatever, any of those socials. It's not hard to find me.
Jamin Olivencia, current
That's right.
Rush
Don't
Division
mess it up.
champion, the 11th Warrior. What a thrill this has been. I know that for me and everyone here, this has been a really great thrill, and thank you so much for coming.
Hey, man. Thanks. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is ours, really.
It's an honor and a privilege, and it's good to be alive. Cheers to that.
Good to be
Cheers to
alive.
that.